All right, Ron Bamieh.
David Parsons.
Good to see you.
And my first experience with this format, very interesting. I like it.
We're head-to-head. We got like a chess. I feel like there should be like a chess board between us or something.
Should be something. Because I'm uncomfortable how close you are.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, right? I was actually, when I was getting this table, I was like, how many feet should we be apart from each other?
Oh, this is a good distance.
I think it's good.
Yeah, because you can't hit me and I can't hit you, so
right.
It's good.
And now I can have my laptop up and I can bring up the questions that people are asking and want to know about.
Oh.
The number one thing that people wanted to ask you about and ask lawyers about is this. I don't know how much you followed this Luigi Mangione case. Have you followed it at all?
We're not going to do any intro what we're doing here? Nothing? You're just going right into it?
AMA. Ask me anything,
okay.
And you're the me.
All right.
So, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, people ask. It's funny because when you solicit questions to ask of lawyers, the most common thing that people are asking is like legal advice questions. What would I do in my case? Like that sort of thing.
They can ask those questions.
But a lot of people wanted to know about this Luigi thing, and I wondered if you followed it at all. I mean,
I've read the case. I mean, I've read about it in the paper. I don't know anything
that anyone else doesn't know.
Right. I shouldn't.
If this guy, so he hired this attorney who used to. I was interested in this because he hired an attorney that used to be a DA.
Okay.
In Manhattan. Her name is Karen Friedman.
I'd recommend that anytime you're hiring a criminal defense attorney, you hire a former prosecutor.
Why is that?
Because I'm one.
Because you're one.
Yes.
But I mean, I do. Are there a lot of criminal defense attorneys that used to be prosecutors?
Not a lot, but there are a few. Yeah. Well, I'm trying to think of how many I know. I know at least 5 off the top of my head. Yeah. 6. So yeah, I could come up with probably more too. At least
just
6.
Like in the area.
Here in Santa Barbara, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll give you this. Okay, so 2 schools of thought.
Yeah.
One is if you were a true die-in-the-heart defense person, you would think, well, why would I want to hire a former prosecutor? They don't think like defense attorneys. Mm-hmm. They're part of the system. They were the man. They were putting these people away. Now you expect them to get you off. Mm-hmm. That type of thing.
Yeah.
What I have found...
They have a cop mentality,
right.
etc. Yep.
But what I have found, and I'll say this as nicely as I can, I believe, excluding the public defender's office, I think some of the best, I will say the best defense attorneys locally, or at least in my opinion, are former prosecutors. Mm-hmm. I have found that to be true, like just the way they try cases, the way they work their cases up.
It makes sense to me because you know the other side.
Well, we also have lots of trial experience and proving cases. Mm-hmm. Like I tried 80 cases when I was a prosecutor. You have to prove a case when you're a prosecutor and putting on them before a jury, and you kind of know how they think. Mm-hmm. And what I tell clients when they walk in about that, I say, you have to assume that the other side is not an idiot.
Right.
So if they charged you with a crime, they have a belief that you did the crime. Not saying that you did or didn't, or even that they can prove it. I'm saying that they have a belief that you did it. Now, you have to get to the bottom of why they believe that. And I believe that I'm really good at doing that. Mm-hmm. And then once you understand the other side, then you can formulate a defense.
Right.
Okay. Also, I believe because of my experience as a prosecutor, I have a high degree... a great skill in predicting what the other side's going to argue or say or do.
Right.
Okay, and I'm pretty accurate with this.
How much of it is a mystery? Because I mean, isn't that like part of the whole procedure is discovery, right? Them
right.
letting you know, like showing the cards basically and what they have, but there's also a strategic element at play.
There
right?
is, yes, and also there is discovery that prosecutors get easily because the cops give it to them.
Right.
And there's discovery that is out there that the prosecutors haven't asked for and they say they don't have. So they're being honest, they don't have it. But you know damn well it exists, and you have to force them to exercise their duty to go get it.
Right.
And so, and I think most people deal with you ethically, but you have to understand that the prosecutors, when they have a ton of cases like the public defender's office, and getting discovery can be difficult. Mm-hmm. It can be like, well, I have to jump through all these hoops to get it from the agency, or the agency would have to jump through all these hoops to get it. And so they'll give you the answer. Like, hey, look, I'm looking for X, Y, and Z. Well, I don't have it. I said, okay, but I know the agency has it.
Right.
Well, how do you know that? I know because I've worked with that agency for years. When I was a DA, I know they've had it. That's just the way it works. I know how they keep their evidence. I know what they're doing with it. They have it. You have to get it. Well, I don't have it. And then when they go to court and say I don't have it, then I force the court to ask them, well, have you asked the agency if they have it? Mm. And then, that's one of the issues. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, let me give you an example, like how they pick a jury.
Right.
I know what a prosecutor's looking for, 100% what jurors they think. And then I can make a decision whether their theory is correct or not. And most of my times I'm sitting there, especially when it's younger prosecutors or mid-level prosecutors, I will know, okay, they definitely want this jury because they think this guy's really going to help them. And I'll know that. Mm. And sometimes I'll make a decision not to go over after that guy because I will think they will take jurors that will be favorable to my side because they're worried about getting that guy kicked. Mm. It's hard to explain, but like right. I'll get a read on it and I'll say, okay, and the client will say, we should kick that guy. We should kick that guy. Well, that's the prosecutor's favorite juror. We got to keep him because we want to keep our favorite jurors. And so you're making an assessment.
Exchange.
I also understand how they're trying to prove a case, and I know what throws them off. And I know the rules really well for both sides. For instance, any kind of forensics case where there's scientific evidence, the prosecutor is going to rely on the crime lab in Ventura County, an expert there for whatever reason, DNA, autopsy from the pathologist, potential fingerprints, tire prints, gun markings, whatever. Well, I know that the crime lab has a policy that they have to talk to both sides because they're trying to say they're independent. They're not, but they want to say they're a crime lab, even though they were under the Ventura County Sheriff's Department. They're trying to say they're independent and they're just here for the science. Well, to be independent, you can't ignore the defense.
Right.
If I ask nicely to come see you and talk to you, you have to say yes.
But they do have a bias for
100%.
the state, more or less.
Yes. Yeah. They think they're essential to getting the conviction.
Right.
They testify mostly for the state. They know all those people by their first name. They socialize with a lot of those people. Yeah, there's a strong bias. So it's not like an independent crime lab. Like some states have independent crime labs.
Right.
Okay. In Ventura and Santa Barbara, we don't. They're under the Sheriff's Department.
CSI people.
Yeah, they work for the Sheriff's Department. They get their paycheck from the Ventura County Sheriff. They're under their rubric. So, but
do you feel like it's ever like unfair to the point of it being like illegal, like what they're withholding from you, or is it a process to like wrench information from them?
I think
if you know they've got this bias.
I think if you don't know what you're doing and you don't ask the right questions, you won't get it. Mm. And a lot of cases get resolved before anybody puts anybody's feet to the fire to get all the evidence.
Like they could take advantage of a naive lawyer, defense attorney,
or somebody who is not looking at the case correctly.
Okay, so the Luigi case, how would you, if this guy came to you and was like, Ron, I need you to get me out of a jam. I'm being accused of killing this healthcare CEO. I mean, the angle on it to me is like it's a big high-profile case. There's a lot of news. There's a lot of like social media on it. How would you even approach like a defense for this guy?
I would say Luigi, first of all. It's not a whodunit.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, we would look at all factors that establish your identification as the perpetrator, which seems that there's a decent amount of evidence that establish he is the perpetrator. He has writings and things even about doing
manifesto.
These. Right. Anytime one of your clients has a manifesto, it's usually not the best thing for your defense.
But I'll say this: I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it's a hooded figure on the video. You don't see the guy's face.
Yeah, and so first thing we'd look for is to see can we have any argument towards identification. What is the argument towards identification? Now, we don't know all the evidence. For all we know, his fingerprints, his DNA is on those bullets. Mm-hmm. We don't know. That'd be a hell of a coincidence. I didn't do it, but my fingerprints are on the bullets.
Right.
He also apparently wrote some things on the bullets. I don't know if there's any evidence that shows he had the technology to do that.
So how they plead not guilty in a situation like that?
You always plead not guilty in that situation because they're charging him, I'm guessing, in California, I don't know what New York has, but in California, there'd be a variety of charges you could charge him that would cause you to have, if you were convicted, to have suffer life without parole.
Yeah, it's like terrorism charges and things like that.
Well, things like lying in wait, planning your murder out completely. That would generate you to go life without parole. So the first thing I would tell Luigi, if they can prove that you're the shooter, okay, then our only chance is to mitigate the charge. It's not to get you off, I'd be telling them, you're going to go do some time. The question is, how much time? Is it the rest of your life? Or is it 20 years? That's what we got to figure out.
Right.
And I would approach it from that. And so first thing, you don't assume anything's true. I never ask them if he did it or not. I see what they can prove.
Mm-hmm.
Can they establish his identification? How are they going to prove his identification? Okay. And then what's the evidence of his background? And then if they can, then I get him really well shrunk and see if I have any capacity defenses, mental capacity, lack of,
right,
things that would mitigate the intent required for that. But it's a difficult defense. It's not like there's nobody who's getting them off if they know what they're, if the prosecutor knows what they're doing.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of people online that like see Luigi as a hero, right? And maybe offline as well, that think like he is a vigilante. And I feel like the vigilante cases are weird because it feels like you could play on public sympathy somehow.
Okay, so what you're talking about is, can you get a jury nullification?
Right.
Right. Jury nullifications are not allowed. Okay, so you're not allowed to argue you should let him go because
he's a good guy.
He's good, not because he served a greater purpose than all of us. He made a statement that you should respect. If you argued that, the judge would shut you down and tell the jury you can't do that. There's actually instructions that jury nullification is not allowed. It's it's all in the jury.
So what is jury nullification?
I'll give you an example. Okay, I had a case where I tried it, but I tried it a little more subtle. You can't say it out loud. You got to be subtle about it.
Right.
Where my guy was a basketball coach at the college, and he had money that he collected for the basketball team, and he commingled it with money he had for a club team. He spent all the money that he collected on the college for the college kids, bought things for them, got them things that got kids to come to his program and play in the program. But a lot of these kids didn't have money. They needed places to stay. They would need food. They would need to get a trip home, whatever. And he would help pay for that. And he also commingled his club basketball money with it. All right. A lot of the charges went away because we could prove that he didn't do anything untoward.
Right.
However, he did take money raised for a public entity, the basketball team, and commingle it with non-public money. That's illegal. That's a crime. Okay. So, and there's no getting around that. The evidence was what the evidence was.
Right.
So I'll give you my jury nullification argument that I gave. So I get up at my closing argument. At the end of it, I say, I want to tell you all a story about a shepherd. His name was Muhammad. He worked in this field, and his job in his community was to watch the sheep at night while everybody slept. And occasionally, other people would do it also, but the rule was, look, if you don't watch the sheep or you leave the sheep unattended and they get killed, you also get killed, because that was the livelihood of the village, and the village couldn't afford to lose the sheep. And so the penalty was death if you did that.
Harsh.
So one night, he's watching the sheep, and as he's watching the sheep, he hears a child crying and screaming. And the child's crying and screaming, and so he runs to see what's going on with the kid. The kid is drowning in a stream at night. He jumps in, risks his own life against the current, and saves the child. Took hours, obviously, to do this. Brings the child home to his parents. Says, I found him. They take him away. He goes back to his sheep. When he came back to his sheep, some wolves had decimated half the flock. Well, under the rules of the village he lived in, he was to be put to death. And they had a trial. And the trial, they said all this to him. And he admitted, yes, I did it, and I should be put to death. And nobody wanted to put him to death because they all recognized he was actually a hero. But they didn't want to put him to death. He was a good man. He was a very good man. But he understood what the penalty was, and the village understood what the penalty was, and nobody could say different. And so he just asked for one favor. He said, may I please go say goodbye to my mother in the neighboring village before you kill me? And everybody in the village took a sigh of relief. And they said, of course you can, because they thought, okay, he'll go. We'll never go look for him. He'll escape. And we don't have to kill Muhammad. We don't want to kill Muhammad. We all love Muhammad. So let him go. And they thought, problem solved. Well, by his word, a few days later, he came back. And he says, I'm here. I'm ready to be put to death. And the village was shocked. They didn't want to kill Muhammad. Nobody wanted to kill Muhammad. The penalty did not, was too great for what he did.
Yeah.
Obviously. And so they were getting ready to kill him when finally the head of the village stood up and said, I don't want to live in a village where we would punish and kill a man like Muhammad. That's not a village I want to live in. And so I looked at the jury. You don't want to live in a city or a county that would punish a man like my client.
Oof.
And I sat down.
Laying it on thick, man. Good Lord.
And then before I sat down, the jury, we took a recess, and the DA realized, oh shit, that's jury nullification.
So you said it in a kind of like roundabout
Well,
way.
everybody's just following my story as I'm telling this tale. I told it a lot more. I put a lot more details and a lot more fluff.
In their jury instructions, no, that was good. I was totally on Muhammad's side there.
Right.
In the jury instructions, is there jury nullification as an option for them?
No, you can't.
So how do people know how to do this?
They vote not guilty because you can get instructions saying you can't do this.
Right.
Okay. You can't. You have to base it on the evidence. You can't base it on your desire to let the guy go. Okay?
Right. It has to have a legal basis.
Right. But when the prosecutor made her objection, the judge goes, yeah, that was jury nullification. And if you objected, I would have sustained it. But you didn't object. So let's find out what they do now. That was the judge's response. Unfortunately,
because you were making like a non-legal argument, basically. You were making like a moral argument.
I was making we should let him go, not because he didn't violate the law. He did violate the law, but because we shouldn't live someplace where we convict people who do good things. And
Do you
just on a
think
legal technicality.
Luigi's lawyer would actually risk doing that kind of
I don't know if you
strategy?
can. I don't know. I mean, I think it's a little different when you kill somebody than when you commingle funds, okay?
Right, yes.
All right. He killed somebody in cold blood on the street.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm anti that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know if that argument would work for Luigi.
Even when it's a big bad healthcare CEO.
Well, the thing is, in some cases,
Shot in the back.
in some
too.
cases,
Good Lord. No
in
honor.
some cases, you can do what we call in the trade, and I don't mean any offense to anybody, you can dirty up the victim. Where you talk about all the bad things the victim did, all the trouble the victim caused, everything. Like gang member did this, shot this person, did this, whatever. However you want to you can dirty him up. I think it'd be very hard for a judge to allow you to, because there was no self-defense argument. The guy's back was turned.
Right.
So it'd be very hard to dirty up the CEO, whose name I don't even know, by the way.
Brian Thompson.
Oh,
yeah,
there you
he's
go.
a very standard kind of name. But yeah, I mean, it seems like it seems like a case that I don't know, that there's a lot of like deep feeling about it on all sides of it. But one of the things that the lawyer was upset about was Eric Adams, the New York mayor, like did like a perp walk with the guy, and the lawyer did a press conference and said like he shouldn't have done that, right? Like there's something unfair about that.
Yeah, well, it's not the classiest thing to do, but there's no there's no legal remedy to it.
Right.
You can bitch,
Yeah.
but you're not going to get any action on it. It's not like a trial. You could say, look how unfair this was.
Yeah.
Most people don't have sympathy for the perp walk offense. Like
Right.
if you say, oh, you perp walked me, that was really rude. Most citizens are going, I'm glad you did. Now I can see who that guy is. I love seeing that. Right.
Yeah.
So nobody cares. I mean, nobody complained when Harvey Weinstein was perp walked out of that New York City courtroom.
Right.
Right. Everybody's like, hey, that's cruel.
So it seems like the vigilante thing doesn't really, as much as it seems dramatic, like it seems like a movie. Because I'm thinking about like other cases where like people have like shot and killed the people that like killed their kids and stuff like that, you know, and they've gone on trial. And it's sort of like
that'd be different.
Yeah.
Because lesser included instructions for lesser charges than murder one would allow you to get the emotional state in of the defendant. And maybe in this case with Luigi, you could do that because his emotional state could have been affected by his family's lack of insurance care that caused the family member to suffer greatly. That's what I read, at least.
Yeah.
Maybe you can get that stuff in, and how this big bad insurance company denied all their claims and affected his mind, and he wasn't thinking clearly, and he had this heat of passion where he was enraged at this guy for years, and that's why he killed him, and that would lower it from murder one to voluntary manslaughter potentially. Then you can maybe get that argument in.
That's a stretch, though, it seems like.
Well, as we say, we'll stretch as much as we have to, depending on the case a lot of times. But, and then there's part of it where the New York DA may say, well, this trial will be a circus. How do we avoid a circus? And maybe they give him something less than, life without parole. I mean, he's still going to have to serve a sentence. I mean, it's a pretty cold-blooded murder, man.
Yeah, no, I know. And it's actually, I mean, I think everyone sort of took it as, I don't know, a barometer of the public attitudes towards health insurance companies, that many people didn't have much sympathy for the guy that got killed. And they were kind of like on Luigi's side. I mean, even like Dave Chappelle on Saturday Night Live was saying like, I think it was Chris Rock, who was like, sometimes drug dealers get shot. That was his line about it. And it was just sort of brutal. And like people are like clapping and stuff like that. It's clearly like there's like public support for Luigi.
I know.
Which is sort of disturbing. I mean, I get it.
This goes back to the, the have and have not theory. If I feel like I don't have a lot, and I could hurt somebody who does, it's kind of justified.
Right. Yeah.
I have trouble with that.
Or, I mean, dirty up the victim, like you said.
Right.
Like, just kind of dehumanize the person, and, it's a...
Dehumanizing the victim is one thing in the press, another thing in court.
Right.
So, it'll be interesting to see what defense. My guess is his defense will revolve around some mental capacity issues, some enraged issues based on how his family was treated by the healthcare industry.
Something like that.
Be something like that, where he probably has some.
In other words, you don't anticipate that they would make a straight argument like, "Hey, come on, like it was a bad guy."
Can't do that.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
And you can't do it legally. You can't do it.
So yeah, and I don't know. You talk about like jury nullification, and like there are a lot of people who'd be like, "Oh, I've heard a lot of people say you're never going to find a jury that's going to convict Luigi." But you always tell me that there are plenty of juries out there that are ready to convict anyone that the prosecution points their finger at, basically.
Well, I think, first of all, I would. There is a jury that will convict Luigi.
Yeah.
Yes, 100% believe
For
that.
sure.
Right.
That seems like that to me.
And people who are that myopic, they think that there's all these people that have the same views that they will, and I would never convict them, therefore I know they won't. They're just not thinking it through correctly.
Could it be one person, though, on the jury, though, that could like sink the whole...
There always could be one person on a jury, but most people follow, as I've told Sidgey before.
Yeah.
And they will follow because there's a great deal of pressure applied to jurors to follow the pack.
So it doesn't sound like Luigi's getting away with this.
Well, I don't know what get away with is, and who knows? He may get a really great jury. Who knows?
Yeah.
And they may acquit him. I doubt it. I really do. And I'm going to guess in Vegas, if they're gambling on this, the acquittal would get really good odds.
Did you follow the Jussie Smollett case?
I did.
How would you defend that guy? For those that don't know, he was the guy that sort of like he was an actor, and he basically said that he was a victim of a hate crime, and that there were people that attacked him and put a noose around him. I think in Chicago.
Yeah,
might have been Chicago. Yeah. I mean, how would you? And then the police investigate and they figure out that actually this guy maybe like staged this whole thing.
He did actually.
Yeah. And maybe even hired guys to like beat him up or something. How would you defend someone like that? I mean, it seems like what a mess that is.
It was first thing I tell him to shut his mouth because he kept talking.
Yeah.
I would tell him, you need to really stop talking because it's not helping. You need to stop talking. Two, once again, I would question mentally where he was at to do something like this.
Yeah.
Like, what was your motive? And try to part of our job in defense is to understand our clients better. And like, why would you do X, Y, and Z, and try to relate to them a little.
Right.
I try to relate a lot. I try to get them to tell me about what they're thinking, tell me how you felt, what's going on. Explain that to me, because then I can understand them better. Then it helps me put together a defense. Because I like to have some empathy for the people I represent.
Does that always happen, though?
Do I always have empathy?
Yeah.
No. I've had times where I didn't. Yes.
Yeah.
And truthfully, most of the times I do, though. When their checks don't clear, I really have. No, most of the times I really do have empathy for people, and I understand that they're. I've done this now 20 plus years, defense wise, and I've been in dealing with people in the criminal justice system for 30 plus years. It's really naive in most cases. I would say 98% of the cases, there are people who've done things that they regret that aren't great. Like I told you this before, you don't see evil often.
Right.
I've seen it like 3 or 4 times, tops. Okay. I've seen people do a lot of stuff that was stupid. I've seen a lot of people react to bad situations poorly, but they're not evil people.
Right.
They've just done really stupid things. I don't think people who go and rob houses, for instance, they burglarize houses. I mean, that's a sophisticated criminal, but they're not evil. I can understand it. They want money. There's money here. They have a theory about how they're going to get it, and they get it. And they don't. Most of the time, they're not going to hurt anybody. Now, if you go to a house and somebody walks in on you, decide to kill them because they're a witness, then now my opinion may change.
Right.
But so if you can understand a little about what gets them there, like, okay, I have no money. I grew up in this neighborhood. It was really tough to make ends meet. My mom's sick. I need money for this, and this, and that's why I robbed.
You've got a little bit of a social theory of crime. It's not just
sometimes
bad guys and good guys.
No, it's not bad guys and good guys. And that black and white shit never played well with me when I was a DA.
Right.
And there's a prosecutor one time. And she was my supervisor, and she wanted me to prosecute a case. And I looked at it, and I'm reading it, and I go, well, no, we can't prove it. And she goes, well, he's a bad guy. And I go, he might be, but if I can't prove it, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
He's going to be a free guy when I'm done.
Right.
So what are we doing? Let's find a case we can prove. And so this bad guy, good guy thing doesn't ever calculate it with me. And I'll still get prosecutors to this day who will tell me, well, your client's a bad guy. And I'll say, well, thanks for informing me of that, but can you prove it? You know, the bad guy thing doesn't weigh in with me because most people aren't truly bad or truly good.
The public has a lot of the public has an attitude about criminal defense attorneys for that very reason, though. Like you defend the scum of the earth, you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah, but
you make money defending the worst people, kind of thing, and it's sort of like, to me, that always ignores the legal system entirely. Like, there are rules to the way this goes. You can't just be like, you're a bad guy, therefore anything can happen to you.
All right. Well, my wife will sometimes say to me, like, you know, how could, like, there was a case in Ventura one time, and there was a guy, a teacher, very popular teacher, who got run over by a woman who was high on Xanax, and she killed.
I remember this case.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I represented the woman, and my wife and somebody here didn't want me to take the case. And I said, this is what I do.
Yeah,
I take these cases. You know, I have an award saying, when I won an award for a criminal defense attorney award, and it said, you know, for representing the damned, you know, was part of the saying of the award. And there's something to that. You know, we represent people who have nobody else to help them, and nobody else wants to help them.
That was a woman in that case, right?
It was a woman, yeah. Anyway, the point of that case, though, is my wife, though, because my wife really didn't want me to take it because she kind of knew the teacher. People here knew the teacher. I had letters from people in the community, don't take the case, please don't take the case. I took the case. So flash forward to recently, my wife got a traffic ticket, and it was sent here, okay? We're not going to use names for reasons, but my wife got a traffic ticket, and it was sent here. And she's like, I wasn't driving on that day, and we know from Life 360 she wasn't driving on that day in the area where the ticket was supposed to be met. So I said, hey, do me a favor, you know, call VPD, because it's one of those picture generated tickets, right? Red light tickets. And so I said, go get the discovery. And so we got the picture, and it's not my wife in the picture. And she goes, I've been falsely accused. This must happen all the time. How dare they do this to me? And I said,
like, it's on the other. You're on the other side now.
See, the thing is about our justice system, if we deny due process to even the worst, of the people who did anything, if we just said, I'm good enough, kill Luigi, I saw the video.
Right.
If we deny the due process to them for even the worst, we're denying due process to all eventually.
Yeah.
And that's a terrible place to be as a society.
I agree.
You know, and so if you don't have people who are willing to represent those who are charged, the system does not work. It really doesn't. And I'm not taking this as some pie in the sky liberal theory that I have. It really doesn't work. And any good prosecutor would tell you this. It doesn't work because we don't have confidence in the convictions that we're obtaining. Our system falls apart and we have chaos. And so everybody should get a defense. Now, it doesn't mean I'm not saying everybody should go free. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that everybody should have a defense. Everybody should have somebody who's a professional look at their case to make a determination on what can be proven and what can't be proven. Everybody should have a zealous advocate to represent their interest in court, especially even if they have money or they don't have money. They should have somebody who can represent them in court in an effective way to make sure that their conviction, if they are convicted, is justified. Otherwise, we have no confidence in what we're doing. And if we have no confidence in what we're doing, the system falls apart.
I've wanted to ask you this since we did the Justin Merriman thing. If you were a defense attorney back then, would you have taken Justin Merriman as a client?
I would have.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And how would you have defended that case? Maybe.
Hard to say because I'm so far on the other side of that one.
Right.
So it's hard for me to put myself in the shoes of the defense attorney for that case. But I probably would have focused on not getting him onto death row more than they did. They tried to defend the murder.
Because that case was mind-blowing in the sense of, like, that there was no body. Like, if I'm a defense attorney, I'm like, there's no body. You're basing this all on just, like, the word of this of other people.
And Justin Merriman.
Yeah.
We had his statements.
That's right.
And, you know, I've never defended a death penalty case. I've defended special circumstances cases. I've not defended a death penalty case because by the time I was doing defense law, nobody was getting the death penalty.
Yeah.
But the to think about. I think one of the mistakes that were made in that case, and I'm not criticizing the defense in that case. I guess I am kind of, but like they went from he didn't do it in opening statement till he's guilty of a second-degree murder in his closing statement. And
that's confusing.
I just don't think that was a great way of doing it because you lost credibility with the jury at that point.
Right.
And so, and I have found this to be true.
It's like the whole theory of the case changes.
And I've just explained this to my daughter that when you're on the defense side, you don't have the benefit of the doubt. Juries look at you askance. You know, they're looking at, what are you trying to pull here, Bamieh?
Right.
Okay. And so in a trial, what you're trying to do is build that trust over time with the jury so they see that you are telling them the truth on everything you do. And that's what I try to do. And showing them that, like, hey, every argument I make, everything I say, everything I'm doing it honestly and with integrity. And I'm showing you ahead of time what I'm doing. And I'm explaining to you that, look, I'm not taking a side that's saying, hey, look the other way, I'm trying to trick you.
Right.
I'm taking the side that says they can't prove it because X, Y, Z.
Right. I was thinking about that. Like, what's the balance between saying he didn't do it or my client didn't do it and that argument versus the argument of, like, they can't prove?
It's a big difference. Because when you say he didn't do it, you're saying to the jury, let me prove to you something. When you say they can't prove it, you're saying hold them accountable for their burden of proof. Let me show you why they didn't prove it.
Is that a better strategy, the second one?
Typically it is.
Rather than just being like, he didn't do it.
Well, like in my wife's case, though, she didn't do it, and I can prove where she was. So I'll
Right.
say she didn't do it. You got the wrong person. I can prove. Look at the picture. Here's my picture of my wife. She didn't do it. That's a case where you can do it in. In most cases, you can say, what I always tell people is not proven equals not guilty.
Right.
And so if they can't prove it, not guilty. And that's what I usually attack.
Okay, we got a couple other questions.
Go for it.
One of the things that people want to ask, and I don't know if this is in...
Anybody, you can ask me anything, even case-related questions of other people
I don't know
ask.
if this is within your purview at all, but there are ICE raids going on around in Oxnard and Ventura right now, and people, especially employers, are asking, like, what happens when... And, like, even my wife is a professor at Oxnard College, and they're all talking about, like, what happens when the ICE brigade shows up? Like, what rights do we have? And people want to know, like, who do you talk to? Or is there certain types of lawyers that you go to?
Well, it depends.
How do you deal with that?
So, first of all, ICE is a government agency.
Right.
It's like a police department.
Yeah.
Okay, so you treat it as such. So the same rights you would have with the police, you have with ICE. And the same things you can't do with the police, you can't do with ICE. And I'd recommend you don't.
Right.
So let's say ICE came to the door of this law firm today. And let's say you were here illegally, David. Okay, we're not saying he is or isn't. We're just saying hypothetically. All right, if they came to the door and they said, ICE, we want to come in, I would say, do you have a warrant? If they didn't have one, I would say, stay outside.
Right.
Okay, and they can't come in.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to without a warrant. Now, if they can go get a warrant and they show it to me, I'm going to let them in because I don't want my door broken.
Right.
But if they don't have a warrant...
I wonder, are they getting warrants when they come into places of business? Because what I'm reading about where this is happening is like basically like factories and,
well, here's the thing.
Plants
if I open my door, if they said, hello, ICE, and I open the door and go, hello, ICE, they can walk in.
Right.
Okay, now I'm letting them in. If I don't open
Just if you open the door?
Yeah, I said, hello, ICE, how are you? And they walk in, they're in.
Yeah.
They can look now. Anything in plain sight, they can do. So your rights are only as good as your willingness to demand that they are exercised.
Right.
So, like, we have the right not to speak to the... So if ICE came to me and said outside, hey, does David Parsons work for you? Do you see what you know where he is? My standard answer to all police officers who ask me questions about potential crimes that have been committed is I don't answer questions. You know why? Because I don't have to. They're the government. I don't have to say anything to them. If somebody walked up to me, I'll give you an example. I had this case where my client unfortunately hit somebody that died at night. Okay, and he came
in a car.
Yeah, and he came to me the next day, and he told me about it. And I told him, "Hey, look, that they're going to figure this out." And he goes, "I don't think anybody saw me." And I go, "Yeah, I'm going to say they did. Somebody did see you, because they put the picture of your vehicle in the paper. I could see it right here in the Star. So I'm going to say that somebody saw you." Or they got some camera, they got a partial plate. They're eventually going to.
And you don't have a legal responsibility to like rat this guy out.
Well, I'm just giving them at this point. No, I don't have a legal responsibility. I absolutely have.
When the police are looking for someone that commits a crime.
No.
And the guy shows
Absolutely
up
not.
to your, and he's like, I was the guy that
And
did it.
I said, and he goes, well, how are they going to prove I'm driving? I go, your phone will prove that you're driving because you'll have location identifiers on your phone. And the person tried to give me their phone. I said, I don't want your phone, nor will I take your phone because I don't take evidence.
Right.
This the rule of thumb, right? And so he leaves. Okay. Well, guess what he left behind?
His phone.
Yeah.
Did you do that on purpose?
I don't know, but what do you call it? I had somebody go to his house and give him back his phone.
Yeah.
Because I don't want it.
Right.
Okay. Flash forward a year later, they finally figure out the case. And somebody tells the police that I have his phone.
Wow.
They come to my office and they say, do you represent so-and-so and so-and-so? I did at the time. And I said, that's none of your business. And he goes, well, we're told that you have his phone. And I said, okay. And
You didn't deny it or
and they said, do you
confirm
have his
it.
phone? And I said, I don't answer questions. I just don't answer questions.
That takes some discipline, though, because wouldn't you just be like, no, of course I don't have his phone. Isn't that the
No.
instinct?
And then I said to him, I said, now, if you want to go get a search warrant, it better be really good. Because if you come here and you don't find his phone, I'll be suing you.
Yeah.
And I'll be naming you individually. Because I'm guessing your evidence sucks.
Right.
So just be careful out there. That's what I said.
Yeah.
But I don't answer questions.
Right.
And you got to be disciplined. But if you start answering questions, yeah, David Parsons, he's right upstairs. Matter of fact, he was getting ready to run. Now you give them probable cause to get a search warrant and and come to your office and open your doors.
The instructors at Oxnard College have been told just like tell them, tell the ICE agents like we're calling the campus police to come talk with you and we're not going to deal with you. Like that's basically the strategy they've come up with. I don't know.
I don't know how effective that is because I don't know. The police have zero authority at that point.
Right.
Feds are going to rule. What I would encourage everybody to do is just remember you're dealing with police officers, you're dealing with federal police officers. So you got two choices here. If you talk, tell the truth. Mm-hmm. Okay. I wouldn't say
but don't talk.
or don't talk. Okay. There's not a third option of lying.
Right.
Okay. Just don't lie. Mm-hmm. That would cause you more pain and suffering than would just shutting your mouth.
Right.
If you do talk, tell the truth. Or choose not to talk. And it's very simple. I don't answer questions. Thank you. Very politely.
You've talked about how the police will often sort of misrepresent your rights to you and that sort of thing. I mean, how are you supposed to contend with that if they're lying to you?
Well, first of all, police can lie to you. It's
Right.
legal. The way you counter everything like that is with your own education, understanding your own rights. If you don't understand your own rights, then that's on you, in my opinion. You have to understand the rights you have, and you have
You just
to
got to be
enforce them.
polite and say, listen, I'm not going to talk with you guys. Good luck with your operation.
Right. I don't. I in general choose not to. Now,
Yeah.
there may be occasions when I need to talk to the police, and I will.
Yeah.
But I will tell you this: if I do talk to the police, I'm telling the truth. I'm never lying. Okay, it's never going to
Yeah,
help.
I think that seems like the number one thing you've impressed upon me is don't lie.
Right.
Because you're going to get caught in that.
So I tell people in court, I go,
Yeah.
you're going to testify, answer the question as asked. If they make a false allegation, deny it cleanly, do not explain. And if you're testifying, tell the effing truth.
Okay, I got one more for you before we go. This one is about family law. Our listener, Mario, hi Mario, he says, what can a parent do when the other parent keeps him or her from seeing their kid or kids when there are no matters pending and there have been zero matters adjudicated? So let's say they were never married, but have two kids together. They're now broken up, living apart, with the kids staying with one parent. One of the kids has emergency surgery, and the parent with unofficial custody does not want to let the other see the kid. In fact, they threaten to call the police.
Mario, you're in need of a court order. And so here, even if you're married and you're separated, whatever, or you have a kid, you've never been married to the person and that's your kid, and there's no court order and you've just been going on basically each other's goodwill. Hey, you get them this day, I get them that day type deal. And then that falls apart and then somebody's not letting the other person see the kid. You need a court order. And you file officially in the courtroom. You say
You need a lawyer to do that for you, right?
You can do it yourself at the self-help clinic. It's a little harder through the self-help clinic at the courthouse. And
Is there a YouTube video I might be able to watch?
I don't know, but there could be.
I mean that seriously.
I know, but the courthouse has volunteer people that have legal assistants that will help you fill out the paperwork and stuff
for
like
family
that.
law.
For family law and restraining orders and things like that. And you file for paperwork, or you get a lawyer who does it for you, and you file for custody of your child. And you put in the court order. The court will decide. And assuming there's been no abuse and everything has been kosher and everything like that, and everybody has equal rights. But when you do that, you have to understand that along with that comes child support. And that somebody may have to give some money to support the kid, which you should do anyway. But if there has been no order and you haven't been paying child support, and you go to get custody of the kid, and the other person has had the majority of the kid over time, or you make more money than the other person, you're going to be paying some child support, which is what you're supposed to do.
Right.
And as I always say, is the price of admission. So what you need is a court order. Without a court order, then you have chaos. And so what Mario needs to do is get to the courthouse, file the paperwork, and say, I want to have custody of my kids. And the court will fashion some kind of custody agreement. And one of the things that they'll put in there is, in any emergency procedures, another parent has to be notified. If he's in the custody of X and something happens to the kid, they have to notify you, and you're allowed to see the kid. They'll put that in the orders.
Right.
Okay. They'll put all this stuff in the orders that would govern the relationship with you and your ex and your children. And those orders allow you to go to the police and say, hey, officer, this, and or bring her back to court and say, hey, look, she should be in contempt because she didn't give me access here and there and there. But the only way to govern such a thing when people won't cooperate is through the courts. It's not through, let's go fight, or let me grab the kid and run.
Right.
It's like when you have chaos, you want to get some order, and that order comes through the judge.
That's how you keep it above boards.
Right. And then people always think they can just do this on agreements and handshakes and cooperation. And I'm sure for some people that works just fine. But when things go to shit, or when people don't get along, or when people get angry, and you don't have orders, then there's nothing to enforce. And the police will tell you, if you call them, they'll say, why don't you go get a court order?
That makes me think of something that Jen Yates said on the podcast once about how people have like handshake agreements that they'll just sort of like, go off the court order essentially. And I asked, like, when do people go back to the court order? She said, oftentimes when like someone gets a new partner.
Right.
And it's all of a sudden like things change, feelings change.
Why is Sally watching my kids? Sally's a slut.
Yeah, exactly.
That happens all the time. No offense, Sally.
Sorry, Sally.
Yeah. So, the thing is, most of the legal questions anybody could ask me, whether it's about their case or some other cases, it's pretty common sense.
Yeah.
And so I'm always happy to answer questions from people. And when people call the law firm, sometimes whether we take the case or not, I'll try to answer their questions. So at least they get some guidance on, what they can do.
And I want to say at the end of this podcast, well, thank you, Ron, first of all, for answering all these questions. If there are listeners that have more questions for Ron or any of the other lawyers here at Bamieh and DeSmith, please let us know. I have an Instagram thread up that's like a mega question thread. So if you find our Instagram page, which is linked in the episode description, you can ask more questions of us. So thank you, Ron.
And no, my pleasure. And what people will find is that the more legal questions you have, if you have 10 legal questions, what you truly need is probably to hire a lawyer.
Yeah.
At some point.
That's the thing. I think it's hard, and part of what we're doing here on the podcast is, answering some questions for people. But it seems like people know that in order to get real specific about their own situations, they got to end up paying at some point, and that's what's hard about finding out good legal information.
Right. Well, there's certain practical advice that you can give people, like we did with Mario.
Right.
That's easy, but the more detailed your questions are, which we'll try to answer if you send them, the more eventually what it'll take is somebody to sit down and actually do some serious thinking and research about your issue and give you a real answer that they can put in writing for you that you can rely on.
At what point does that happen when you're talking with clients? Because people come for, free consultation kind of thing. And what point does it move to like, okay, you're hiring me now?
Well, so
I'm sure it's different for every case.
It is, but like in criminal cases, I'll use that. That's the simplest one. I can't give you an opinion on your criminal case unless I see everything that's, what do you think is going to happen to me?
Right.
Well, I can tell you the worst thing that can happen to you with this charge is X, because I can read it in the penal code and it says the maximum penalty is 8 years. I'm not saying you're getting 8 years. I have no idea. But if you're asking me if you're not guilty, I have no idea. I haven't read the reports. But don't you take my word for it? I go, I can't take your word for it because the DA is not taking your word for it. I have to look at what they're saying about you so I can formulate an opinion. And what I tell all the clients is that once I read all the reports and I've gone through all the evidence and I've talked to you about it, I will have an opinion and I will express my opinion in a very strong fashion. You will have no doubt what I think. Okay. As you know, I give opinions all the time.
Yeah.
But what I won't do is I won't sit there with somebody in my office without reading anything and say, this is what's going to happen to you.
Right.
Or I'm going to get you off.
Yeah.
Because I don't do that.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. Or this is going to be the result of your case when we sue. We're going to
Well, that was the thing you said in your How to Hire a Lawyer in your book and the podcast we did about it is like if a lawyer is making that kind of promise to you right off the bat in a free consultation, then it's probably a red flag.
Right. And then what I tell people in those people ask me a question like, okay, my wife just filed for divorce. How much support am I going to pay? Well, that's a calculation I have to do through a computer system.
Right.
I said, well, if you want to hire me, we'll get to that number.
Yeah.
But what you should generally think about is about 40% of what you're making.
Oof.
Okay. And people say, what? And I said, well, that sounds bad, but we'll find out. If you want to just off the seat of my
Sally
pants.
gets 40%.
Yeah, but that's after taxes and everything.
Yeah.
And that's with child support and the whole deal. So you got 2 kids. You're living in a house right now, let's say with your spouse and 2 kids.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And you make $5,000 a month. Mm-hmm. How much do you think is going to the wife and the kids?
Quite a bit. Maybe more than 40%. Yeah.
That's my point.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ron. We'll talk again.
All right.